Welcome to Take Charge, everyone, the community platform where we give a voice to those in the energy and electrification sectors. Today, I've got Christina Belsito from Fourth Power. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. And if you wouldn't mind, could you just introduce yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Christina Belsito. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Fourth Power. At Fourth Power, we are working to bring reliability and affordability to the grid using a long-duration energy storage battery. In my role, I work on a number of different really exciting projects at the company. We are in a relatively early stage Series A startup. And so I wear a lot of hats, but I spend a lot of my time thinking about capital formation for the company. So fundraising, both dilutive, like venture capital investors, as well as non-dilutive. I think a lot about the messaging. How are we talking about ourselves to the marketplace, to all the various stakeholders, and our brand and our engagement. I think a lot about internally, how are we building our team? Do we have the right people on the right seats? And how is our organization structured for decision making and goal setting and disseminating information across the organization? I work really closely with a lot of folks all across the organization. I'm not an engineer by training, but I like to know enough to be dangerous. And it's a really great team with some really great tech. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And I guess just on the topic of like energy storage companies in general, that they usually require like $1 billion like gigafactories to kind of scale. How is, Fourth Power, the approach there to manufacturability, how is it different? And why is it such a critical advantage?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I love that we're diving right in. I think before I can answer that question really specifically, it's helpful just to super quickly describe what it is that we're building. So at Fourth Power, we are building a thermal battery, thermal energy storage system. How it works is we take electricity, we store that electricity as heat for long periods of time in carbon blocks. And then when the grid needs it again, we convert that heat back to electricity using thermal photovoltaics. There's a few super unique attributes to the tech that make it really well suited, not only for this particular application, meaning the electricity markets, but there's a lot of the sort of secret sauce that makes this technology possible is in breakthroughs that took place in our founders' labs at Georgia Tech and later at MIT. Our founder is an MIT professor, which demonstrated that our ability to transfer heat throughout the different subsystems of the battery is achievable. And the type of heat that we're talking about is remarkably hot. So the moniker for the technology is that we are storing the sun in a box. Our carbon blocks get to a temperature of 2,400 degrees Celsius, which is literally half the temperature of the sun. To be able to do that effectively requires quite a bit of very brilliant engineering. And uniquely, we utilize liquid metal as our heat transfer fluid. And so the ability that our team has done to plumb liquid metal, right? So when I think it's a liquid, think about any kind of typical plumbing system. You have to be able to move that around through a series of pipes. All of this is made out of graphite. That enables the temperatures that we're able to reach. That unlocks a power density that's quite unprecedented. And that all helps us to achieve the cost targets that our battery can hit, which is remarkably affordable. And that's ultimately why we win, right? In any market, it's not just about being clean. It's not just about being a great product. You have to be the lowest cost option. Okay, so super high level, kind of how it works. I'm happy to double click into any of that if there's interest there. But the topic of manufacturability is also, I think, a really, really interesting nugget, which is helpful for Fourth Power as we think about our ability to gain market share over time. So when you think about kind of other types of grid scale energy storage options out there, there's a few different technology profiles, but what's being deployed today is lithium-ion batteries, right? And lithium-ion has a lot going for it, but what you see on the grid today is really short duration batteries. And that's because as lithium-ion scales, as you get to longer and longer duration, it's just as it's just simply not affordable to get to longer durations with lithium ion. But when you look at also like how those lithium ion companies, or really any sort of electrochemical uh, battery company has deployed, there's always this like massive investment that they have to make before they can start deploying at scale in building their own factory for manufacturing their product, right? So the reality of sort of the type of battery manufacturing is that, first and foremost, most of it does not happen in the US. This is 90+% happening in Asia. And you have the sort of the process of, you manufacture you have cathodes, you have anodes, and then you kind of put them together. You have electrodes, and then all of those kind of inputs or precursors come into the US, and then they get assembled into a cell. And that's the type of work that's happening in these massive factories. And I think it was Elon Musk that gave it the term kind of the gigafactory, which I think is ultimately just is intended to reference the fact that, coming out of these factories would be able to, power kind of gigawatts. This is really expensive. It's really expensive to build these factories. And this is all that is required before they're even being deployed. So before actually like revenue is even really coming in. The parts are super specialized. The inputs are expensive. It's highly sort of specialized work that needs to be done. At its core, our technology is just fundamentally different, right? Like, we are not an electrochemical system. We're quite proud of that, because that actually is a large reason why our system has the safety attributes that it has. There's no reaction that has to take place here. All we're doing is just kind of transferring heat. So it is high temperature, but it doesn't actually come with fire risk that is prevalent in a lot of other types of battery chemistries. There's no like thermal runaway risk at all. It's just fundamentally a different battery type. But the other element is when we think about our own manufacturing. So 98% of Fourth Power system is graphite. It comes from carbon. And in fact, the type of carbon that we utilize is called petroleum coke. It's given the nickname pet coke. This is actually a byproduct of the petroleum refining industry. And it's very cheap. And the U.S. is the number one, or one of the top leading exporters of this product. So we are able to source the 98% of our by mass of our battery domestically, and we can really just use these commodity raw materials to sort of manufacture the various components and subsystems of our battery. And so that just kind of unlocks an ability for us to scale up and at a much faster and cheaper rate than a lot of other types of battery chemistries out there. We think about our scale up as really just a sourcing process, and certainly when we hit certain scales, we'll need to focus more on having like dedicated capacity at some of our with our suppliers, and there's certainly kind of a strategy behind all of that. But really, the sort of we sort of source these raw materials, and then it's about it's a process of final assembly, as opposed to the quote unquote gigafactory, which can cost billions to build.
It sounds a lot more simple compared to the complexities and the different layers that really need to go in. And it kind of petroleum coke as well is kind of just a byproduct of another industry, but we're always looking to make that kind of value chain more circular where possible. That is sustainability at its finest, but it's when it's cost effective as well, that's just even better, to be fair. How would you compare, I guess, just in terms of like the actual performance compared to say like lithium ion technology or other, competing storage technologies? How does Fourth Power compare?
Yeah, so we see ourselves as being complementary to lithium ion systems. As I mentioned before, lithium ion is being deployed today. It's a proven technology. But just based on how much it costs, you really can't get beyond single digit hours of duration. So starting at around 5-6 hours, our system becomes cost competitive to lithium ion. So we see lithium ion as being the dominant player in super short durations. But we can come in starting as the durations get a little bit longer, maybe say somewhere between 5 and 10 hours. But a super unique attribute of our system is that not only is it cost competitive at those early stages, but we can the system is designed to be very flexible. And so over time, as grid needs change, we can retrofit the system and stack on more duration to our battery and really make full use of the system because our sort of the battery's sweet spot from a deployment perspective is really anywhere between 10 hours to 100 hours. So we feel like we sit between where existing technologies are today.
Nice. And I guess just for kind of context, examples of the kind of like applications, things that be powered, what would that be more suited towards in terms of like actually long duration energy storage?
Yeah, so our customers are utilities and or IPPs as well as other large energy users. Think, hyperscalers, for example. But today there is a need for short duration. We see RFPs today for short duration systems, and then for longer durations, really around like the 10 or 15 hour mark. But our expectation is that as more and more renewables are added to the grid, as more and more short duration batteries are added to the grid, that will turn peaks into plateaus, therefore requiring longer and longer durations of storage. And so that's where this attribute that our battery is quite unique in its ability to do, which is to be able to add more duration over time, we think is going to be really value adding for our customers.
Nice. And then just in terms of like actual product development, where are we up to?
Yeah, so the technology was born, as I think I alluded to earlier, in the labs of Georgia Tech and MIT. There was over 10 years of R&D that was done in academia. A lot of it was funded out of the Department of Energy, so there was a number of grants that our founder was awarded, which led to three major breakthroughs that demonstrated that there was a there. And ultimately, at the end, in 2020, 2022, 2023. All of that work culminated in a fully integrated prototype that was at the bench scale. That unlocked Fourth Power's launch, which was acknowledged with $22 million in capital in 2023. And then most recently, we just added another $23 million through a Series A plus round. And so what we've been doing since spinning out is demonstrating the reliability and durability of the full-scale hardware. So our team of engineers has scaled up all of the components and subsystems of that battery to their commercially relevant size. We've tackled those engineering problems up front. We are now putting them together in a series of test rigs, which we've built in our facility here, that run cycles on these components and subsystems and really puts them through these really extreme elements of extraordinarily high temperatures and then also cycling temperatures. So when we think about our battery in its fully charged state, it's at 2400 degrees Celsius. And then when it's discharged, it drops in temperature to 1900 degrees Celsius. And then it discharge again, right? So we are cycling our parts and seeing over time, are they having the reliability and durability? Are they meeting the reliability and durability milestones and benchmarks that we have set for the technology that show that it will have that 30+ year lifetime expectancy, which is what we project. Super interestingly, the material that our battery is made of, graphite, it's actually a material that gets stronger as it gets hotter. And so unlike really most other materials that are out there, in fact, our battery is expected to only get tougher over time.
So it sounds like there's been a lot of rigorous testing.
Exactly.
And yeah, what does the actual like roadmap look like for scaling? Yeah, is there a kind of an end number of like deployed systems you're trying to get to in X amount of time or?
Yeah. So certainly there is. Right now, our focus and with the latest round of funding, what we're doing right now is really, again, running these test rigs and getting reliability and durability data. We're also taking all of the fully scaled components and subsystems and putting them back together again into a fully integrated demonstration. So that will be a 1 megawatt-hour system, and we're building it in our own facility. Getting that demonstration built and getting cycles on it is a big unlock for us to enable future growth and scale over the coming year. In addition, getting commercial backlog. So we have a lot in our pipeline. We want to convert that to conditional agreements dependent on the performance of the demo. From there, we do expect to 10x the size of the technology with a pilot project, which we expect will be approximately a 10 megawatt hour system. Um, and thereafter, the scale up is it's very part and parcel with our manufacturing roadmap as well. So as we think about hitting our cost targets, we'll unlock our ability to continue to deploy, initially using commodity volumes, and deploying, I would say, 100, 200 megawatts of power kind of up in between like the 2028, 2030 timeframe. And then thereafter, 2030 and beyond, we're talking about the ability to deploy at the gigawatt scale.
That is some serious scale, to be fair, and a really good amount of time, and all cost effective as well, to be fair.
Yes. Yeah. So our nth of a kind cost projections are, very competitive. They have to be to win, but we're talking about beating other technologies on the market, emerging and existing, as well as coming in under what natural gas would cost as well, which is super compelling because right now, utilities are sort of left with the only option of looking at natural gas for reliability. But it's the supply chain for new gas turbines is fraught right now. It's taking 5-10 years on just to wait for a new turbine, and it's of course incredibly expensive as well. So the fact that we project even in our early years to come in a really cost competitive fashion is highly attractive. So certainly nth of a kind costs when we're hitting those cost targets. Cost will be why we win, but even our first of a kind systems we don't expect to be unreasonably expensive.
Definitely. And look, with the electrification of everything, the growing demand for power, thanks to kind of like AI, the different applications, I'm sure in the next 5 years we'll be talking about a technology that has just kind of exponentially grown overnight. The demand is just there, to be fair. So, no, it sounds exciting. And just in terms of where Fourth Power's up to right now, you said you just closed another like Series A plus kind of round, which is obviously super exciting. Looks like everyone's really engaged with creating these kind of like pilot demos, working towards it. Is that kind of the priority over the next kind of like 12 to 18 months? Or yeah, what milestone would you like to see hit?
Exactly. So getting that 1 megawatt hour demonstration built and getting cycles on it is priority number one, as well as proving product market fit by getting a commercial backlog.
Nice, nice. And at the beginning of this call, you mentioned part of your role is to make sure that you get the right people in the right seats. And what's your philosophy around team growth? How do you ensure that you've got the right people in the right seats?
Yeah, I think if that were an easy question, there would be a lot more successful startups out there, right? I mean, I think there's not one bulletproof approach because every company is its own snowflake, if you will, right? Because companies are comprised of humans, and humans are complicated. But I think that there's a few fundamental building blocks that I think about with every startup build that I'm a part of. And at the beginning, I think really at the heart, it comes down to is the team really clear on the goal? Not just like the 10-year down the line goal, but actually perhaps more importantly, like what are our near term milestones that we need to hit? And is that goal constantly being kind of defined? And are we prioritizing effectively to hit that goal? And how is that information kind of being communicated? I think that when you're a startup, you're both very resource constrained, but you also tend to have a lot of optionality because you know that, or at least in the startups that I've been a part of that are climate tech, you kind of tend to actually start with a really breakthrough novel technology. There's a lot of different places you could take that technology. So it's not always really clear kind of what is the next value inflecting kind of milestone that you need to hit. So having the ability to identify that goal and stay laser focused on it is I think priority number one. And I know that this question was around kind of getting the right people in the right seats, but I do think that having a sense of clarity and prioritization is super important when again when you're a startup and you're resource constrained, but there's also kind of a lot of uncertainty and a lot of optionality at your disposal. And then I think it's a matter of, looking around you and looking at the team around the table and thinking through, like, is this the team that can see around corners, that as we think about, what is the next milestone ahead? Like, what's kind of missing from this team? I can say, in the case of me joining Fourth Power, that was uh, that was key. That was something that our CEO identified, is that, he came to the table with, after a career at Apple, and before that he was at the EPA. Like, he came with a really clear sense of how do you commercialize this thing, and he came with a really clear sense of how do you manage teams. Um, but he hadn't been a part of a sort of 0 to 1 startup before, so he knew he wanted someone who could bring that skill set to the table. Um, so that kind of who can help you look around the corners, and who has that experience. And then the last bit, which is a bit like finding a snowflake perhaps, but you kind of have to balance finding someone that has that skill set that you're missing, but who also can be a bit of a utility player, because when you're an early stage startup, there's no, like, nobody on our team has the quote unquote, like, that's not my job type of energy, right? Like, that's just not, we don't, like, we can't accept that, right? Like, we're too small of a team, we're too resource constrained. Everybody is working, again, when you're working towards that same goal, everybody is helping each other out. um so if you're in a position where, it's too difficult to find someone who can help you look around that corner, but isn't a utility player, I think something that is important to think about is, like, that's a moment where perhaps you don't have, it's going to be too hard to find that right person for that right seat. And so this is actually where I think using maybe like a fractional support or even consultants is actually really wise for startups. It can feel a little bit painful sometimes, because those can be expensive resources, but there's nothing more expensive actually than if you go about hiring the wrong person, right? Because then you invest a lot of your time, and that's your most precious resource, in finding and onboarding and kind of bringing someone into the team. And then if it doesn't work, like, that's very painful. That ultimately impacts team culture. So I'm a proponent for actually using using like a consultant or fractional support until you can really define the type of profile that you need, or until you are at a stage where you can bring on somebody full time. That's a better fit. So that's kind of at a really high level. I would say that's my philosophy.
Nice. And yeah, I think that's more than fair to say, to be honest, because I just know from speaking to people who've like literally scaled from like 0 to whatever it is. If you get the best people in the room, everything becomes so much easier. And if at that time that option and resource is someone kind of fractional or a consultant, or can just offer that real kind of like USP that you need right there and then yeah, that's what it's about. Otherwise, yeah, you probably just can't afford to. Yeah, I think that's fair enough, Christina, for sure. What brought you to Fourth Power out of interest?
In my career, I've been lucky enough to join a couple of startups that are solving really exciting but challenging problems in the climate tech space. And I would say that in my role, I have I join as one of the first employees, but also one of the first non-technical hires. And I come to the table with a passion and a skill set of laying a really strong foundation for growth at a company across a variety of different functions. And in a way, you can kind of think of my role as someone that can get a number of different functions up to, some degree of completeness, and I can almost identify who needs to come in next to kind of take what I've built and really propel it into that sort of rocket ship growth status. So what brought me to Fourth Power was perhaps a happenstance connection with my network to the CEO of Fourth Power, who had recently come in. As I previously mentioned, the company itself is an MIT spinout. So our founder and chief technologist is an MIT professor. He led the company as CEO in its earliest days, but identified someone to come in, who's our current CEO, Arvind Ganesan, who came from Apple and prior to that was at the EPA for a number of years, to really bring this company forward into its next stage of growth. And when I met Arvin, the two of us just really clicked immediately. I think we found that we had really complementary skill sets, and I was able to bring to the table experiences that he hadn't had before, which was building a startup from 0 to 1.
Nice. And yeah, exciting times ahead. It sounds like it. So yeah, Christina, thanks so much for taking charge and joining us.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.